Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Beauty Voice of Reason live series. Today we are joined by some very special guests, and we're going to be talking all about the future of beauty. So before we dive into the subject, I'm just going to pass it on to Rebecca to introduce herself, and then we can just go around and do little mini intros.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Fern. I'm beauty editor at Eliza.
I'm Ksenia, one of Leona's co-founder.
I'm Winnie, I'm the founder of Kara.
And I'm Sam, the founder of Curate Beauty.
Amazing. So we're all coming to this conversation with different lenses. I think it's a really exciting group of people in the room. And what I want to kind of open with is talking first about digital services. So basically, right now we know that editorial is not dead, but it's dead the way that it was before. And moving forward, things are on social media. And I would love to just pass it over to Rebecca to talk a little bit about what you're doing at Eliza and tell us what the future of beauty and digital looks like.
Yes, I think as you said, it's become a much more social heavy, social first space. I think we are a very visual generation. We're a very impatient generation. So we don't want kind of different platforms for everything. We want everything in the same place. So at Eliza, we kind of place just as much importance on our Instagram and our TikTok and our social media as the website. And we use those platforms as selling platforms as well as content creation. So it's kind of moving in a space, I think, of a fusion of the two, really, like editorial and like selling and sales. And I also feel like it's becoming, or I hope it's becoming, a bit more of a kind of democratic, accessible space as well. We're living in it's the cost of living kind of crisis, and we have to be a lot more aware. And I know that as an editor, I have to be a lot more aware about the content I'm putting out, that everyone feels welcome and everyone feels like they can shop for beauty and be kind of like, be able to have fun in that space. So I'm hoping that's kind of where it's going as well.
Previously, editorial was all print. And so what we've seen is that we're moving digital, as we said. But what about the journalists in the space? Like, how do you think everyone's feeling about the way that the direction that everything's going in?
I think most of us are fully aware that we have to kind of move with the times. And I think a lot of us are kind of being journalists and content creators at the same time. And that's kind of what Eliza is about as well. Like, we're about content creation, but we're also about selling and making shopping accessible. So I feel like new platforms like us are kind of moving things a lot and like bridging that gap. Yeah.
It's a lot of pressure though, because I feel like the content creation piece takes so long. So you're having to be a journalist in your full-time job, and you're having to be a content creator.
Yeah. We literally place just as much importance on, like, we have at the moment, we're going to kind of expand, but at the moment we have our Instagram, our TikTok, and our website. And I think when we started, we thought the website is the product. That's the point of this project. But as we've kind of moved along, we realized it's literally equal weighting, like a third for each. So it is like, it's obviously a lot because it's the content creation for the website, the writing, but also a lot of video content, a lot of imagery, and that's what people want, really.
Yeah. And so, because Sam, you worked in editorial before.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really interesting to have like both perspectives, because you're not working as a journalist really anymore. You have your own business.
Yeah.
But how does that feel for you?
Basically, when I was a journalist, it was very print heavy at the beginning, and it was digital was making its way in. And I remember even the first few bloggers that are now in their millions were starting out, and we're kind of none of us really thought it would take off how it has. And I think the job role of a journalist now is so tough, because before you had a great life. You got sent products, you would write about it, and you would plan weeks in advance if you were writing for a monthly magazine. And now it's like, okay, great, you've got to be a great journalist, but also be the content creator and do everything. It's a lot, but I think it's exciting, and I think it's nice to see incredible new publications come out that are digital first and actually like taking note of what people want. People aren't reading magazines like they used to, so it has to be online now.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I love it. I think especially Eliza's content, it is very forward thinking, because the attention span is so short. And so you're like, oh, I got my little roundup. I didn't have to read like a 10-minute article.
And it's bringing that editorial and, the shopping element together, which, no one can be bothered, I don't think, to kind of go on a website and look at a roundup now, and obviously no disrespect to the platforms that are doing that, but you know, looking at roundups and then kind of individually, you know, like we're bridging that gap between. We're the impatient generation. I'm a millennial. I'm very impatient.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, but I think like with the metaverse and like that whole digital side of things, I'm very interested to see how editorial plays into that too, because it's a huge like platform to, I guess, advertise and all of that. So, I mean, we'll see. I'm sure Eliza will be like getting NFTs and like going into the metaverse at some point. We'll probably be having this conversation in the metaverse, I think.
I'm going to educate myself in that area because I don't even know what it stands for.
I mean, me either. But I think, so we actually have to lose Rebecca, but I'm really excited that we had you for a moment to talk about the digital space. And so we're going to jump back in a second to Future Beauty. But thank you so much, Rebecca, for being here. We're so happy to have you. So we've lost Rebecca, but we have gained BJ. So BJ, do you want to do a quick little intro into your background?
Absolutely. I'm a digital creator and entrepreneur based in London. I've run several different businesses. And as you guys know, when you run a business, your skin goes through it. You have to you have to be ready to basically have a small baggage, a big bag for when you're at home, when you're traveling. And over the years, when you're taking media appearances, I think taking care in how you look and how you feel can really have a major effect in your work. Yeah. So skin care journey has been very important to me.
Yeah, and I think it's great to have another lens again from a male perspective, but also the way the industry is going, it's not going to be gender focused. And so what do we think, I guess, Winnie, what are your feelings about the direction it's going in that sense?
I think it's a fantastic thing. I think particularly when it comes to male grooming, there's just sort of like this thing where people think that men don't necessarily take care of their skin, and they just use like whatever odd thing, right, that they find in the bathroom. But you always see it, right, when your boyfriends are like, "Hey, can I use that?
They steal everything.
Can I use your face cream? Or can you just put that mask that you? Can we have a mask night?" And you're like, "Oh."
I think in my house it's a bit different. People
Really?
be like, "Oh, you have brain.
Right,
Oh, you
right,
have this."
Right. So I think that it's great because one, it speaks to it being more inclusive and being more genderless and including men as part of the conversation. But the broader thing that we're talking about there is thinking about underserved groups.
Yeah.
And actually making sure that everyone is part of the beauty story.
Exactly.
And it's not just one version of the story that's being kind of like purported to the public.
Yeah.
And you see that with male grooming, you see that with Black women, you see that with multicultural women. It can only mean great things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even from us seeing so many indie beauty brands launch into the space now, like it is not uncommon at all for someone to launch a brand that's designed for everyone. It's supposed to be genderless. It doesn't have to be directional to women of this age or men of that skin color. I think that that's the great thing about where the direction of beauty is going now. And I mean, more men, I think more and more are becoming more metrosexual and want to take care of their skin and care about what they've got in their bathroom cabinets, because they should. Why shouldn't they? They shouldn't be underrepresented and underserved, and they should have great skincare too.
Exactly. And I think that moves me on to this next point, which is all about these legacy brands, because what we've seen is that there have been a lot of brands that have not changed with the times. So this is the 17th of June, 2022. This was published in the Business of Fashion. It's all about Revlon. What went wrong with Revlon? It was a slow decline for the 90-year-old company, crippled by massive debt, a pandemic, supply chain issues, and growing competition from startup brands, changing beauty ideals and culture. So I think that that's kind of the perfect segue into this death of legacy brands, because people just didn't change with the time. So I don't know, Xen, you're like a total product junkie, but what are your thoughts on the death of this kind of old, long-standing major brand? Quite sad, I think.
I think it's sad because, we grew up with them. Like, we're talking about it just before, but like the fact that you would go in a shop with your friends and pick up a nail polish, from like Revlon or from another brand, and then, for a pajama party or something. So for sure, like there's a bit of nostalgia and a little bit of, it's just a bit sad to see that they're dying. But at the same time, it's very exciting because it gives the opportunity to smaller brands. And I'm sure, Sam, like you see that too, to rise a little bit more and have a bit more space, because it was so saturated and those brands were so massive and so present. Like you would go anywhere outside, like there's so many adverts, you know, L'Oreal, etc. Like when you go to a department store, like they're in the middle, like they're really there.
They own it. Yeah.
And I just feel like it gives some space to other brands. So I think it's very exciting for that, you know. And I think there's so many great brands out there that deserve the same type of attention. And it just like democratized a little bit, you know, that too. I think like everyone now has a space, especially with the digital world too, you know, like someone can be as present online and offline. So for me, it's kind of exciting, but still, you know, I'm like, oh,
I know, it's sad. Well, they talk about, I mean, in these articles about Revlon, they talk about Revlon like it's an old person that's died. And it's like, you feel a bit very nostalgic, I think, because Revlon was like this powerhouse, but also they just didn't change. And like we were talking with Rebecca about digital first and all of that, they just didn't quite keep up. And so I think it's, I don't know, I think it's sad, but very interesting. What do you think, Winnie?
What's the right word to use for it? Like I saw it like flash up in a notification, but I have to tell you, I don't think I spent time thinking about it because it wasn't in my consciousness. And perhaps that's what the whole point is. Maybe that's why they're not in existence anymore. I just saw it and it just moved on. I didn't even pay any attention to that news bite. And I think it really speaks to the fact that I'm not thinking about them. I wasn't thinking, I've not thought about them since the last time I got that nail polish that you reminded me was Revlon. Was it 90 seconds? Yeah. Like I wasn't thinking about them at all. And I was like, oh, okay, that happened. I didn't even know they were still around.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So I think that, I guess it's about how do you stay relevant? How do you move with the times? What we were talking about earlier in terms of how can you be more inclusive? Because those images that you're talking about when you go into like big stores, those images are not speaking to us anymore.
No. And also you go into a department store and it was the same brands across everything. And now I think what's so exciting is the innovation of these new upcoming indie brands and they're taking space and people are like, oh, that's cool. And you know, you can go into different places and find and discover different things. And as we were saying earlier, like everyone's so inquisitive now. They want to know and they want to know more about the brands. And I think there's so many cool brands launching that are like owning this space. And it's a shame for the big guys like Revlon, but I guess it shows you like times are tough and like they're not sheltered to it. Like they're actually open to this too. And if they're not innovating and making great things that for what the consumer wants now, then that's
I think a big point that I remember from my childhood, like at school, learning in economics, the market decides. Ultimately, there'll be ups and there'll be downs. Yeah. And unless you're a shareholder of Revlon, like as a consumer, as people in the industry, we only want the best for us. And if you think about where society has kind of transformed in the last 10 years, we now have a lot more spokespeople and people who are sharing their truths. So it's no longer, the same format of a celebrity, on that campaign in that big store. Now that can work for some people, but I think for everyone, we've now got the ability to understand what's in these products. We've got the ability to actually have counter communities on Reddit, on Twitter, and on different forums that you might be on, and have conversations with your friends, which is like so different for some of these brands. Like they're not really in tune. So if you're not in tune, you get left behind. And sometimes product development cycles take some time to put out. So unfortunately, if some of these new upstarts are actually speeding up, we as individuals have to just be happy that we're getting the best choice because there's so much more available. And I also think the other side of things that we need to also consider is the high street has changed. We don't just go and buy and just find what we find on the counter. We probably now like research, take photos, screenshots, ask our friends what they're using, and then maybe order online. Maybe go to the store and try it on, get a little try on thing from, Space & K or Boots, whatever, and then come home and then order. So the whole kind of like consumer journey has changed dramatically even in the last 5 years. I think you're going to see more brands like Revlon have to take shape because we've seen it in fast fashion. Arcadia and Topshop are gone now.
It reminds me of that. When I saw that, I was like, oh my gosh, like this is
parallels.
Yeah, exactly. It's really, really interesting. And I think that like for us at least, I'm curious who is going to be left because there's so many brands now and it is tough times ahead, but like who's going to be left? Like I just want to like do a little around the room. Like who do you think is like here to stay?
quite a traditional brand. The Estee Lauder, part of Estee Lauder Group is Jo Malone.
Yeah.
I think actually they've kept kind of the quintessentially British part of the business and the brand, but that they're actually got great like social campaigns, and I think that's something that will kind of set them apart. They did, I don't know if you remember, a campaign called Just Because, and it was all about gifting just because, like you should just gift for any reason, it doesn't have to be. And I think like things like that have resonated with me, and I remember them, and I think that's what more of these big guys need to be doing now.
Totally.
I think any brand, I'm not going to give specific names, but I think any brand that actually takes the time to understand their customers so intimately and actually does the research that is involved in understanding that customer. So say, for instance, we're talking about genderless, right? Are there specific concerns that impact men more than women? And what are those differences? I think any brand that really kind of gets their teeth into that will stay.
Yeah. Yeah, and off the back of that, I think people who actually educate on what their products are doing and who they're for, because I think that now people really have to understand, like, okay, who's my consumer, who actually can use my products, and it's that transparency that community building for sure, but I think it's that transparency that will also help brands to kind of, see the future.
100%.
Because, it's critical. And I know, Xin, from our perspective at least, like we're really focusing on education and on-demand courses and things like that. I don't know if you want to speak to that. I mean, obviously, Leone is going to be here in the future, but...
No, I completely agree. I think that for me, like brands that are going to die in the future is if you approach to them as a consumer and you have a question about their brand and you can't find the answer anywhere, I think like that's gonna, that means that there's, like you said, there's a problem with transparency. And I think people want to have that transparency. And I agree with you too, like the experience, and the fact that you want to know what's inside, etc., is so important. And that's why we also see a rise, like you said, of like, educational platform. Many brands have a little educational tool or a little educational hub, like, Paula's Choice, Inkidis, etc. Like all of them, they know how important it is. And I think that having that experience of, find the right information and being able to get it like in an easy way, that's going to be critical for any brand to survive.
Agreed.
For me, that's one thing. And also, I think the experience is so important too, because if you go to, I don't know, any shops, Harrods, or Harvey Nichols, and you see one major brand, like they're going to look exactly the same everywhere. And I think now it's about like how you adapt in department stores, how you're going to deliver a different experience depending where you are. And I think that's going to be also critical to survive, because if you want people, like you said, to come in and test products, the experience needs to be great. You need to provide something that matches with the tone where you are and with the people that are going to come, etc. So I think that's going to be very critical to survive in a sense.
Totally.
For sure.
I love it. What about you, Vijay?
So I think, just hopping off Winnie's point, it's going to be based on values, methodology that these brands have. Obviously, the background on who stays and who doesn't stay is going to be dependent on cash flow. I've noticed that some brands are starting to buy up and invest in smaller brands. Some of these bigger brands are actually owned by big houses like Coty, for example. And if you look at what Rihanna's managed to do across her portfolio with partnership with LVMH and other partners, that's actually given her the capital to grow. So I think some brands may actually go and buy up places and actually enter new markets in that way. Because I think ultimately some of the best talent that you normally would go and work for Rimmel or for Jo Malone or for some of these big brands, they're now setting up their own brands and actually being independent and doing really well. And then the other side of the coin, which is just as important for the future, is thinking about the fact that everyone is actually consuming things in different ways. And the more people gain education and knowledge, it actually makes it really hard for big brands to just do what they've done always. And right now, I think brands need to start looking at the micro-influencers and start looking at educational platforms like Leone and others to make sure that they're part of the conversation pre-purchasing, not just at the purchasing stage.
Totally.
So I see that happening a lot more. So we've seen obviously the rise of pop-up shops, but I see pop-up museums, I see pop-up video shows. There's going to be a lot more educational things that are not just on a retail level.
I'm really happy about the direction that the kind of industry is going. I think that It's been so exciting to have all of you guys in this room today to speak about it. I know we're going to be back. We're going to have like volume 2.
Yes.
And
in
also
the metaverse. In the
metaverse. Exactly. We're going to be watching this back like in 10 years. Like, see, we were onto something. So thank you guys so much for being here. And thank you all for listening and watching along with us. It's been a great day.